Jerusalem, especially the Old City, is a place of many contrasts.
Over the years, the Temple Mount Sifting Project has uncovered a treasure trove of artifacts, like this piece of pottery, throughout Jerusalem's history.
History tells us a golden temple once stood on a hill in Jerusalem, but the physical proof remained a total secret. Because the site is so sacred, the truth was buried under layers of politics and stone. That was until a team of scientists used cosmic rays to X-ray the Earth itself. What the artificial intelligence found in the shadows is truly shocking. Could these invisible particles be the final witness to a 3,000-year-old mystery? The forbidden 35 acres. Jerusalem holds a small patch of land that might be the most valuable spot in the world. It is only 35 acres in size, which is about the same as 26 football fields, yet it has caused more arguments and wars than almost anywhere else. People call it the Temple Mount. For thousands of years, this hill has stayed at the center of three major religions. Because it is so special to so many people, nobody is allowed to go down and dig under the ground. It is a total lockdown. If an archaeologist even picks up a shovel and looks like they might start a hole, it could cause a huge problem between different countries. This means that the history buried under the stone has stayed a total secret for a very long time. Ancient books say that a famous leader named King Solomon built a massive gold-covered temple right here about 3,000 years ago. The stories describe a building so big that it took 7 years to finish and used 180,000 workers. They say it was filled with wood from Lebanon and held the most sacred box in history, which was the Ark of the Covenant. But for 100 years, experts have been fighting about whether any of this is actually true. Some thinkers believe Solomon was just a small-time leader of a tiny village and that this giant temple never really existed. They think the old stories are just tall tales made up to make the city sound better than it actually was. Since nobody can dig to find out who is right, the mystery just sat there, stuck in a tie. The people in charge of the surface keep things running for daily prayers, while the experts on the outside can only guess what is hiding in the dark layers of dirt below. It is a giant cold case that has been sitting on the shelf for a lifetime. For a long time, it felt like we would never get a straight answer because we were not allowed to look. But everything changed when some clever scientists realized they did not need a shovel to see through solid rock. They found a way to use tiny bits of energy from outer space to peek inside the ground without moving a single pebble. And that is where the real magic started. The cosmic X-ray. To understand how we finally peeked under the Temple Mount, we have to look up at the stars. Every single moment, the Earth is getting hit by invisible energy from deep space. These are called cosmic rays. When they crash into our air, they create tiny bits of matter called muons. You can think of a muon like a heavy, fast version of an electron. They are so small that they rain down on us by the billions every second. They pass through your body, through buildings, and even through solid mountains without you ever feeling a thing. Because they are so heavy and move so fast, they can go through hundreds of feet of rock before they finally run out of steam and stop. This makes them the perfect tool for seeing things that are hidden deep underground where no human can go. A group of smart researchers from Tel Aviv University decided to use these space particles as a giant X-ray machine for the city. Led by a man named Professor Erez Etzion, they went into a dark and wet cave south of the Temple Mount. This area is called the City of David, and it was not an easy place to work. The team had to use ropes and pulleys to lower a heavy machine into the darkness. This machine was a muon detector, and it was about the size of a large dresser. It was full of wires, tubes, and metal parts that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. The cave was humid and messy, which is the exact opposite of the clean, bright labs where these scientists usually work. They had to run long power cables through narrow ancient tunnels just to get the machine to turn on. The way the detector works is actually pretty simple. When muons pass through solid stone, they get tired and slow down. But if there is an empty space in the rock, like a secret room or a tunnel, The muons fly through it much faster because there is nothing in their way. By putting the detector in the cave and letting it sit there for a long time, the team could count how many particles were coming from different directions. If they saw a bunch of fast muons coming from one specific spot, they knew they were looking at a hidden hole in the earth. It is like holding a flashlight behind a thick piece of wood that has a tiny crack in it. Even if you cannot see the crack from the front, you will see the light shining through. In the year 2023, they proved that this wild idea actually worked. They successfully mapped out secret spots under the city of David without ever using a drill. It was a total game changer for history. For the first time ever, we had a way to look into the most protected ground on the planet without upsetting anyone or breaking any laws. But the researchers were just getting started. They knew that if they pointed their space particle camera just a little bit further north, they could finally see what was hiding under the sacred stone of the Temple Mount itself. And that is when the computers found something truly shocking: AI and the geometry of the anomalies. Once the muon detectors gathered all that raw data from deep space, the scientists were left with a massive pile of numbers that looked like a giant jumble. To a regular person, it just looked like static on an old television set. This is where the power of artificial intelligence came into the story. The team used very smart computer programs to look through millions of these data points to see if there was a hidden message inside the mess. These computers do not care about old legends or what people want to find. They only care about math and patterns. While a human might see a weird shadow and hope it is a temple, the computer just looks for shapes that are way too perfect to be made by nature. The computer started to flag things it called anomalies. In simple terms, an anomaly is something that does not belong. Nature likes to make messy lines, wiggly cracks, and jagged rocks. It almost never makes a perfectly straight line or a crisp 90-degree corner. But as the artificial intelligence scanned the ground under the Temple Mount, it started finding exactly those things. It found spots where the ground was much less dense than the rock around it, which meant there were definitely hollow spaces down there. But these were not just random caves. The computer showed that these empty spaces had flat floors, straight walls, and very specific angles that repeated over and over again. What made the scientists really stop and pay attention was the way these shapes were laid out. The AI found rooms that were lined up perfectly with each other, almost like they were part of a giant blueprint. Some of these hidden walls were exactly parallel to the huge foundation stones we can see on the surface today. Others were sitting at angles that suggested they were part of an even older building that was there long before anything we know about today. The computer was basically drawing a map of a ghost building that had been buried and forgotten for thousands of years. It showed that there is a massive network of rooms and paths that no modern person has ever stepped inside. These shapes were so precise that the experts knew they had to be made by people. The computer identified one specific area where the walls formed a long rectangle that was far too large and sturdy to be a simple basement or a water tank. It looked like the skeleton of a monumental structure. The data showed that these stone remains are still sitting there in a totally perfect state, hidden away from the world. It was like the computer had peeled back the skin of the earth to show us a skeleton we did not know existed. This high-tech map proved that the ground under the sacred site is not just solid rock, but is actually a complex maze of history. This discovery was quite shocking, especially after everything that's been written in history books, because it meant that the physical proof was finally within our reach. And it perfectly matched a huge discovery made by a different team of experts who were looking at the very tiny details of the soil itself. The ghost of a great city. While the computers were busy mapping out the shapes of secret rooms, another group of scientists was working on a different kind of puzzle. For a long time, many experts argued that the city of Jerusalem during the time of King Solomon was just a tiny, boring village with only a few houses. They claimed there was no way such a small place could have built a massive, gold-covered temple. In the year 2024, a major study was published in a very important scientific journal called PNAS that turned this idea upside down. This team did not look at big stones or space particles. Instead, they looked at things so small you could barely see them, like tiny seeds and burnt olive pits found in the dirt. These researchers from the Weizmann Institute and other schools used a method called microarchaeology. They spent years collecting over 100 samples from 5 different spots around the city. They were looking for an absolute timeline, which means they wanted to know the exact year these things were left behind. In the past, people just guessed the age of a wall by looking at the style of the pots found nearby, but that was not very accurate. This new team used a super powerful machine to measure the carbon inside the seeds. This machine is like a very expensive clock that can tell you exactly how old something is by looking at its atoms. But there was one big problem they had to solve first. There is a period in history where regular carbon dating does not work well because the results come out blurry. It is like trying to read a book where the ink has smeared. To fix this, the scientists looked at the rings inside very old trees from Europe. They compared the Jerusalem seeds to these tree rings, which helped them create a new, super precise timeline. They found that nearly 20% of their samples came from the 10th century before the Common Era. This is the exact time when David and Solomon were supposed to be ruling. The results, of course, were a total shock to the people who thought the city was just a small village. The data proved that Jerusalem was actually a busy, growing city, with big buildings and lots of people living there during that time. One of the lead professors said that the evidence now points toward Jerusalem being a real city, rather than a tiny hamlet. They even found that the famous city wall was built much earlier than experts used to think, matching exactly what is written in the old books. This meant the city was strong and organized enough to build something as grand as a temple. With the city proven to be real, and the underground scans showing hidden rooms, the only thing left was to find actual objects from the temple itself. Evidence from the trash. In 1999, there was a huge mistake that happened around the Temple Mount. A group in charge of the area used heavy bulldozers to dig a massive hole in a corner of the Temple Mount to make a new prayer hall. They did not call any experts or check for history. Instead, they ripped out 400 truckloads of ancient soil and dumped it into a nearby valley like it was worthless construction waste. It was a disaster for history because centuries of layers were all mixed up and thrown away. But a group of determined people refused to let that history stay lost. They started the Temple Mount Sifting Project. They took all that dumped dirt and began to wash and search through every single bucket of it. It was slow and messy work, but it paid off in a huge way. Over 20 years, they found thousands of objects that proved people were active on the hill during the time of the first temple. They found a very rare stone seal and pieces of pottery that were only used by wealthy and important people in the 10th and 9th centuries before the Common Era. One of the most exciting things they found was a tiny piece of clay called a bulla. This was used like a wax seal on a letter. It had ancient writing on it that named a man called Gedaliahu. This same name is found in the old books as a person who lived right at the end of the first temple period. Finding the physical mark of a person from the storybooks in a pile of discarded dirt was incredible. It was proof that the stories were not just myths, but were about real people who lived and worked on that very hill. These small finds were like tiny puzzle pieces. When you put them together, they showed that the Temple Mount was a busy place during the exact time the old books say Solomon and his family were in charge. Even though the dirt had been treated like garbage, the objects inside it told a story of a rich and powerful kingdom. The stone box key. To fully understand how the temple actually looked, we have to travel about 20 miles away from Jerusalem to a place called Kirbet Keyafa. This was an old military outpost sitting on a hill. In the year 2011, experts digging at this site found something that changed everything. On the floor of a building near the city gate, they pulled a heavy stone box out of the dirt. It was carved from a single block of limestone and was about the size of a large toaster. Even after lying in the ground for 3,000 years, You could still see traces of red paint on the outside. This was a shrine model, which is a small version of a much larger sacred building. When the researchers looked closely at the front of this box, they were stunned. It had very specific carvings that showed exactly how buildings were designed during the time of King David. It featured tiny rows of 3 lines representing wooden roof beams and door frames that were recessed, meaning they stepped inward like a set of nesting boxes. This might sound like a small detail, but it was actually the missing piece of a very old puzzle. For hundreds of years, people who studied the ancient books of the Bible were confused by the words used to describe Solomon's temple. The language was so old that the original meaning of the technical terms for the windows and doors had been lost to time. The stone box from this hill fortress acted like a dictionary. The carvings on the model matched the mysterious descriptions in the old texts perfectly. The recessed doors on the box were the same as the mezuzot mentioned in the Book of Kings. The beam carvings were the selot. Suddenly, the words on the page were no longer a mystery. We could see the physical style that the ancient writers were talking about. 2 professors, Josef Garfinkel and Madeline Mumkwoglu, said that this single find illuminated a whole world. It proved that the style of the temple described in the stories was a real type of architecture that people in that area were actually using during that time. This model showed that the people of that era were capable of very fancy and organized construction. It was a blueprint, and it gave the scientists working with the underground AI scans a clear idea of what kind of shapes to look for beneath the Temple Mount. But the stone box was not the only thing found at this outpost. The entire city was built with massive walls and organized stores, proving that a strong kingdom was in control of the whole region. This strength was fueled by a massive industry hidden deep in the desert, where a giant supply chain was moving materials back and forth to the capital. The desert supply chain. Deep in the desert of the Arava Valley, at a place called Timnah, experts found another major piece of the story. This area is famous for its bright green rocks and massive cliffs, but its real secret was buried in the sand. For a long time, people thought the copper mines in this desert were built by the Egyptians, but new tests proved they were actually at their busiest during the 10th century before the Common Era. This is the exact time when Solomon was said to be building his great temple. According to the old books, the temple used so much copper and bronze that no one could even weigh it all. Many people thought this was an exaggeration, but the mines at Timnah tell a different story. The archaeologists found a massive 5-meter wall, heavy gates, and weapons that showed the mines were a high-security site. But the most interesting discovery was actually a bit of ancient donkey manure that had been preserved by the dry desert air for 3,000 years. When scientists looked at this manure under a microscope, they found something that made their jaws drop. The donkeys had been eating straw, hay, and even grapes that did not grow anywhere near the desert. In fact, the food for these animals had been brought in all the way from the area around Jerusalem. This was proof of a massive and organized supply chain. It meant that the kingdom in the north was sending high-quality food and supplies down to the desert to keep the mining operation running. In return, the copper was being sent back to the capital. They even found pieces of clothing made from expensive, colorful fabrics that were worn by the metal workers. These were skilled craftsmen who were part of a very wealthy and powerful system. All this copper was flowing into the city just as the old stories described. The mines proved that the people of that time had the money, workers, and the organization to handle massive building projects. It shows that the kingdom was a major power that could move resources across hundreds of miles of harsh land. And with all this wealth and metal moving into Jerusalem, the city needed to be protected by more than just soldiers. They needed giant walls to keep their treasures safe. And a recent discovery showed that those very walls are still standing today, exactly where they were supposed to be. The surviving wall. For a long time, Historians thought that when a great army from the east attacked Jerusalem in the year 587 before the Common Era, they destroyed every single part of the city walls. Ancient texts record that the enemy tore down the walls on every side. This made experts believe that nothing from the time of the First Temple could have possibly survived on the surface. But in the year 2021, an archaeologist named Filipe Vukosavic made a discovery in the City of David National Park that proved those experts wrong. He was leading an excavation when his team uncovered a massive section of a stone wall, a pretty huge and solid fortification that was still standing tall. And what made this find so special was that it sat right between two other pieces of wall that had been found years earlier. Finding this middle section proved to the team that there was a continuous line of defense along the eastern side of the city. It was like finding a missing piece of a puzzle that suddenly makes the whole picture clear. The wall was built to be incredibly strong. It was meant to protect the city from the top of the hill all the way down to the valley. Near the stones, the team found small storage jars with special stamps on the handles. These stamps were like official government marks used by the kingdom. They also found a small seal made of stone that came from the Babylonian people, who were the ones who eventually attacked the city. Finding these items right next to the wall proved exactly when it was used and what happened there. This discovery changed the way experts thought about the history of the city. It showed that even though a giant army tried to wipe Jerusalem off the map, they did not finish the job. Large parts of the city's original defenses stayed standing. An expert named Joe Uziel noted that the long argument about whether this wall actually existed is now over. He said that while people in his field love to argue, the physical proof is now so clear that it cannot be denied. This wall is a direct link back to the time of the kings and the temple. It proves that Jerusalem was a heavily protected fortress that could hold out against some of the strongest armies in the world. But a city this big needs more than just walls to stay alive. Engineering the drought. The story of Solomon's city is not just about gold and stone, but also about the clever way the people managed to survive in a dry land. In August 2025, a team of researchers published a study that showed just how advanced the ancient engineers in Jerusalem really were. They were looking at a massive structure known as the Siloam Dam. This was a giant wall built to hold back water and create a large pool for the city to use. When the experts measured it, they were blown away by its size. The dam was about 40 feet high and over 26 feet wide. The dam's size was remarkable. It stretched 69 feet in visible length, with more extending underground beyond reach. Experts called it the largest dam ever found in the country and the earliest in the city. To determine its age, scientists analyzed small bits of straw and twigs embedded in the original plaster. By testing these materials, they concluded the dam was built between 805 and 795 before the Common Era. This was a time when the city was ruled by kings like Joash or Amaziah. During those years, the land was going through a terrible time. Records from old caves and the bottom of the Dead Sea show that there were long periods where it did not rain at all, followed by sudden, violent floods. The city was in trouble. To save their people, the leaders of Jerusalem organized a massive project to build this dam. They used their knowledge of math and stone to create something that could catch the floodwater and save it for the dry days. This kind of project is what experts call state-level engineering. It means you need a lot of workers, a lot of money, and a very smart plan to make it happen. It was not something a small group of farmers could do on their own, which made it clear that the kingdom had the power to change the landscape and control the environment. If they could build a dam this big to save their water, they certainly had the skill to build a massive temple on top of the hill. The 50 detector array. The success in the city of David has opened a door that was locked for thousands of years. Now, the team led by Professor Etzion is moving toward a goal that sounds like something from a movie. They are building a new generation of muon detectors that are smaller, cheaper, and easier to move. Instead of just one big machine, they want to place 50 of these detectors all around the area at the same time. This would create a giant web of space particles that can see through the entire hill from every possible direction. By using 50 different viewpoints, the computers can take all that data and build a perfect three-dimensional map of the world underground. This map would show every single tunnel, secret room, and every hidden path that has been sealed away since ancient times. The best part is that this work does not require a single shovel. The scientists can stay in the tunnels outside the sacred walls, while the Muons do all the heavy lifting. This allows them to search for the truth without causing any political or religious trouble. Professor Oded Lipschitz, a leader in the project, sees this as the future of archaeology. He believes experts will soon scan a site and understand what lies beneath before digging. Artificial intelligence could detect hidden structures and compare them to ancient descriptions. If it identifies dimensions matching sacred texts, the discovery would be groundbreaking. The system does not rely on belief or interpretation, only on measurable patterns and the geometry of existing structures. We stand at the edge of a new era, where advanced technology is completing a story thousands of years old. Evidence points to a powerful kingdom, and now we are finally mapping the exact place where it once stood. So what are your thoughts? If the final 3D map reveals a chamber that matches the exact dimensions of the biblical temple, how do you think the world would react to the physical proof of Solomon's greatest work? Could these space particles be the final key that solves the mystery of the Temple Mount once and for all? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.